back, everybody, to another episode of the Unfounded Podcast. My name is Christopher Turner. I am your host, and thank you for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed last episode. I'm back at it again, and like I said at the end of last episode, I think I was able to find or rekindle a certain fire inside in last episode. It was really powerful emotionally, and I hope it hit you in the same way it hit me. I've listened to it back a couple times, actually 3 or 4 times, and every time I've picked out different aspects of what I was saying there that would hit me emotionally when I re-listened to it. And so I hope that episode had the same effect for you. And I'm realizing that partially what I've gotten away from as I've stopped producing content is some of the foundation of what this show is meant to be. And it really was initially meant to be about vulnerability, a journal of sorts. And so I'm getting back to that, not only because I think it's good content, but mainly because it's something I need, something I haven't been doing for a long time. And I think one of the reasons why I've been progressing forward so slowly, personally. And I hope that's helpful for any of you that are listening out there, that oftentimes we get caught up in the world and what the world tells us we need to be doing. And many times that's either the opposite of what we should be doing or just significant enough that it obscures the path that we want to actually be on. And so this morning, I have a topic in mind, and that's why I'm sitting down and recording this, is because there's been something that's been weighing on my heart. Just this morning, actually. And I think, as a matter of fact, I'm actually in the middle of the process of releasing a certain trauma, certain baggage that I've been carrying for a long period of time in my life. And I'm hoping that as I speak about it, as I go through it and try to explain what I'm going through, that helps you with whatever you're going through at the same time. So thank you for being here. But the topic I want to talk about is kind of actually a contemporary topic. It's something that's going on in the world right now. And if you're paying attention to what's going on politically, which I'm sure it's almost impossible not to at this point. We're getting so close to the elections here in the United States. That just recently, there was about 2 or 3 days ago, there was a video that was released of ex-President Barack Obama. And to set this up, I kind of want to explain to you where I came from politically, and talk about that for myself at least. That I studied politics in college. It was something that I was fascinated by when I got out of the military, in a direction that I thought I wanted to take my life professionally. And so while I didn't start initially studying politics in college, I thought I wanted to be a teacher initially and studied science for the first couple of years. I realized about halfway through that that's where I was more interested in, was history and politics, social sciences. And so I switched my degree to political science and American history, kind of a dual major essentially. It's a certain degree called interdisciplinary science, and the idea is that you take 2 different disciplines that seemingly don't relate to each other, and you try to relate them. And while my choices actually do have a very direct correlation, what I've found as I went through my studies is that there's a lot of aspects of American history that are disconnected from the way that politics are taught in school. It revealed a lot to me. That being said, the way that I was taught political science was through a certain liberal lens that is very prevalent in the universities. And because of that, and also because of my youth, I believe, we all have this tendency as we're in our young adult years to have a certain type of compassion and idealism built in. This is kind of the spirit of the child, that I believe that the liberal perspective at best gives an outlet for, at worst, preys on that drive. But I became very influenced by the liberal perspective and started to view the world through that perspective, the one that's become very popular modern day. And the version that's actually popular politically today is different than the one that I was taught even 10 years ago. It's far more extreme. But even in the day that I was studying politics, I realized that what I was being taught was extreme because of the context I had in the other studies I was involved in American history. And so even though I was very liberal, I had this questioning inside because of the incongruencies I was noticing and what I was learning that started to grow while I was in college. That being said, I remember one of the first times that I could vote was, I believe, the 2012 election. And the first election Barack Obama was in, I remember I really wanted to vote, and I wanted to vote for him because, as many of us, hold on one second here. Gotta switch up some of this background music for me. As Barack Obama came onto the political scene, there was, and many of you may remember this if you're old enough to remember, an energy of progress that was really inspiring, especially to those of us that were young at the time, that led us to believe that we were conquering a certain type of sick history that had plagued America. That we were in some ways finally conquering the spirit of slavery, segregation, the spirit of racism itself, and that Barack Obama was the figure that represented that. And so a vote for him, I believe this is how many people felt, regardless of what your skin color is or what your background was, religious ideologies. That you believed if you voted for him that you were voting for that future. And even the second time around, I was still so enamored by that image of a future without all of these horrible things affecting it, that I was so excited to vote for him, and I voted for him in 2012. And then as we progressed on towards the 2016 election, I started to slowly realize, I think without realizing it, that what was promised to us wasn't actually coming into realization. That actually in my own life, my personal experience, it seemed that I had started to experience more of those things, see more of it, hear more of it. And then came Trump. And I remember having a visceral reaction to Trump. I despised him initially. And I was so confident in that liberal conception of the future that I remember I voted for Hillary in the 2016 election. And moving forward in those initial couple weeks after the election, the shock of it, I was depressed and angry enough to where it affected the way I treated people that I cared about. And there was something in that the way I was acting had actually changed to a degree that it was starting to affect the relationships I had, could damage them permanently. That forced me to have a recognition in that moment that said, if this person that you are hating so much does something that actually is good, you must recognize it. Otherwise, you're going to devolve into something that you won't like. And it wasn't that clear in the moment. I just knew that I had to recognize that, to admit that, to accept that, to say that I would do that. That I will see the truth and I will support it, regardless of whether it agrees with what I think right now. And then what went on to happen slowly as Trump became president and as time progressed is things got a little better from what I could tell. And it took me it took me a couple of years to even realize that. It was hard. Because there was a lot of things that I just didn't agree with in the figure of Donald Trump. The image of him. But then as I started to recognize good things happening around the world, things that I agreed with, less conflict, for instance, even though there was in some ways more critiquing of Donald Trump himself, it seemed like the world itself calmed down a little bit. And I started to feel confident again, proud even, in the country that I lived in. One that I had, volunteered to protect, to join the military because of that idealism that I felt, because I was appreciative of the country that I live in, wanted to give something to that, contribute. That had been slowly eaten away over those 8 years Obama had been president, and I didn't even really realize it until Trump, until I started to feel proud about America again. And that was confounding because the figure was still somebody that I didn't really agree with in an image sense. Yet I was experiencing positive emotions. My life was getting better. I was feeling better. And so I just accepted that. I started to accept what I was recognizing, and slowly my heart started to change. That hatred and that anger that I had felt for years at this point, that had really twisted me, started to melt away, and I started to see the different areas and aspects that I had been wrong in, and the ways in which I had negatively impacted those relationships I was talking about. The responsibility started to appear that I had to repair those because of the damage I had done through my ignorance. And so these are all recognitions that as I employed in my life got better. And so in a weird way, what I view politically modern day is actually intricately tied to my development as a person. And again, that's weird to say in the same sentence as a figure like Trump, because he's so imperfect, boisterous. Some would say arrogant at times. But the point being that he embodies aspects of the human being and shows them on the national stage that we as a society have tried to hide from ourselves for far too long. And I think it's in that I've gained respect, admiration for the figure of Donald Trump, and started to realize my own faults. And I hope that if you're listening to that, this is compelling for you, because it is honestly what I've gone through, and honestly why at this point in time I'm somebody that supports Donald Trump. And I'm proud to say that for those reasons. Let me clarify something. I'm not trying to make Donald Trump into a bigger figure than he is. I don't want to idolize anything or anyone. I recognize that what Trump is an opportunity for all of us. A certain vulnerability, whether it's intentional or not. The audacity that's innate within Trump allows us to see our own flaws if we're willing to. And that's a gift. Like I said, it doesn't even really matter if it's intentional or not. It's the fact that we get to see again that's so brilliant. And I feel compelled to explain that to you to start this podcast, so that you understand the context, some of the context about what I'm going through right now, because I'm going to talk about an anecdote this morning, which I don't usually do, share something from my own life. So this morning I've been going to, and I've been starting to get back into a certain, I guess you'd call it workout routine, but it's not really about working out. It's more of an energetic workout routine, right? Getting myself back up, picked back up energetically. And so I've been starting to do things, stretching, going to the sauna again on a regular basis, trying to, and things like yoga. And so there's a gym that I go to that offers yoga classes, and I often go to these classes. And yoga is a fascinating discipline, right? Because it does work at multiple levels, not only physically, but it works energetically. And the reason I'm going to explain this story is because I've been experiencing both levels this morning, and it can be confusing, right? It's very confusing when you start to feel energy move around, especially energy that's been stuck. The way it can affect your psyche, your consciousness, can drastically impact the relationships in your life if you do not know or recognize what's going on in the moment. More specifically, if you're not comfortable enough with yourself to be able to see when you make a mistake. Like I was explaining earlier with Trump. Like I've done. Like I did this morning. Right? One of my traumas, my deepest traumas, relates to women. For those of you that listen for a long time, you may understand why this is, but I've experienced in my life abuse, specifically from women, early on in life. I was, and this took me a very long time to realize, recognize, but sexually abused when I was very young by a woman in a position of authority in a daycare center. This is something that I did not realize had happened to me for most of my life. That might sound confusing. But the reason that is because it was such a traumatic event and such an early stage in my life that my psyche couldn't handle it. And it just tried to delete it to protect me. And it did a pretty good job of that. Except it can't delete it completely. And so I went on through my life feeling incomplete, broken. I had a hole inside of me that I didn't know why it was there. And it wasn't until I started to search that I realized that I had been hurt. I had to really look for it, and it took me a long time. But I found it. But just because I found it doesn't mean the healing's done. I had been angry my whole life. Specifically, I had had such a hard time having intimate relationships with women. At points in my life, it even confused me about my sexuality because I felt like the way I felt when I wanted to be intimate with a woman was something that was also carried with it fear and insecurity that shouldn't be there. So it made me feel like maybe I wasn't the same as other men. And I felt this way even as a young child, very young. And it affected my confidence, made me feel insecure, thus affecting my ability to present myself properly to women. And that affected my life for years. Most of them up until the moment that I'm speaking to you right now, because I'm still working through releasing some of that. But because I have that trauma, because I have experienced pain, something wrong from specifically a woman in a position of authority over me, I have a certain bias that if I don't recognize will cause me to misjudge the world, other people, to ruin relationships. So this morning I was going to a yoga class, and then the lady that teaches the yoga class has been there many times. And as a matter of fact, I've gone to her classes before, and one of the other classes that I've gone to, I remember getting frustrated in and kind of leaving and telling myself, I don't know if I want to go back there. But I didn't think deeper about it. Why? Because yoga is positive. You like it. You're doing something to help yourself, to heal yourself. Why would that turn negative all of a sudden? Well, it takes time sometimes. I didn't realize it until this morning. But as I was sitting there going through the motions and listening to her direction, I felt this certain frustration inside, a familiar frustration building. And it told me not to listen. So don't listen to her. And it was this certain type of mistrust. I don't trust you. I don't trust that you're going to direct me in the right way. I don't trust that you're doing this for the right purposes. I don't trust that you're not going to hurt me. And in the moment, I just kept going through, actually listening to that voice of unreason, not going through all the motions properly, doing them quickly, not breathing properly, doing things I know are the opposite of what I should be doing while I'm in yoga, to properly move the energy around. So that devil on my shoulder that I was describing to you last episode was walking me around this morning. And it had good control. I couldn't even hear that whisper this morning. But we got through the class, and I left. And my mom had come to the class with me this morning as well. That's partially why I was excited to go, is because I like doing it as kind of a thing that we can do together. And so as we left, I felt that frustration sitting there, and she was kind of saying that was nice, she enjoyed it. And my experience was so opposite to that I didn't know how to respond initially, and I knew internally that I shouldn't speak what I was feeling out loud because it wasn't proper. It was unbalanced. But as we were walking away and we were going to get ready for the day or going into the locker rooms, I started to say some things about what I was feeling to her. And I don't know if I like her as an instructor, and I don't trust her, and I don't know if she's doing it properly. All of these criticisms of somebody that's just trying to provide a service. Something that's completely optional, that I don't have to be there doing. Right. And so as I went on, I was going to go into the steam room, and that frustration grabbed me again and said, no. And I turned and I said, I'm just not feeling it today. And I walked out. And as I came home and as I drove home, everything was kind of sideways in the world. Everything felt wrong. I was a little more agitated. People seemed more aggressive as they drove. Things seemed to be in my way in ways that they weren't when I was driving there this morning. And I know this feeling. I know when the world looks that way, that it's because of me, not the world. And if you're listening to this and you felt the world look like that way, or if the world's looking that way to you, I'm here to explain to you why it looks that way so that you can really get it to stop. It's because of you. That's the truth. And it's not a judgment. And it doesn't mean you're less than. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're not worthy of salvation or anything else, any other negative thought that goes through your head as you feel that, any other shock to your body as you hear or recognize that I'm wrong. Right? Let that pass. There's a process here that's going on. It's tricky. It takes determination on your part. You see, we've trained ourselves because we've been traumatized to identify certain things as indicators of a threat. Because of that animal brain deep down, that devil on your shoulder, as I described it in last episode, has complete control of you when that certain characteristic pops up in the world. It seizes you, and it makes you feel like a zombie. It walks you around. The reason it does that is because that hole is still there. That thing still has a hook in that place where you were hurt. And whenever anything reminds you of that, even in a tertiary way and slightly, that hook gets yanked. You can feel it pull you, right? And it'll make you act in nasty ways. Ways that immediately after you act, you feel a sinking sensation, a sorrow for that voice of reason, that angel on your shoulder comes through and says, no, you know you're not seeing this right. The world doesn't look this way. So in that moment, you have a choice, and it's a hard choice. It's a choice that most human beings avoid. We avoid it so effectively that we almost don't even recognize it exists. But it is one of the most fundamental choices you are given as a human being that you have control over in your life. And it is to choose in those moments where you feel powerless to describe in your own words out loud what the actual truth is. That's what I'm doing to you right now. That's what we're doing together. And I hope that we can heal from together as I do this. That I'm saying it out loud. I was hurt by a woman when I was a kid. Because of that, I have a natural mistrust. I have a hook in me. That when I see women in positions of authority, I question it. I mistrust it naturally. And oftentimes I'll even be pulled, if I let that hook pull me enough, to try to undermine it in subtle ways. And the reason I brought up the political aspect before I talked about this is because of the contemporary issue that's going on right now. Barack Obama and some statements he made recently. A couple days ago, he came out with a video speaking to the Black community specifically, in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, you're not jumping on board, speaking to specifically Black men, that the Black community is not coming and supporting Kamala Harris in the same way that they came and supported and voted for Barack Obama in 2012 and 2008. And there was a shaming he was doing there, and it was somewhat subtle, but it was just that, a shaming. Shame on you for not supporting your club, your tribe, for not doing what I thought you would do. Right. And one of the points that he brought up is the point that I wanted to bring it up in this conversation. Because while I don't agree with Barack Obama's motivations or his conclusion, I do think that he's using a truth that does exist in this world improperly. And this is a tricky thing that happens. You have to really look for truth, because even people that are being dishonest can say the truth sometimes. And the reason why is because people that are being dishonest often use the truth to their advantage. They'll pick and choose aspects of the truth, and they'll use that when it advantages them, and they'll discard it when it doesn't. But in this aspect, Obama said something true. And I'm saying this, and I'm speaking to men out there, not just black men, men everywhere. I'm speaking from my own experience. And I'm speaking so that we heal this. And I'm speaking so that any woman that listens to this knows we are working on it. That you're not crazy. That there is a reason that women have been so angry throughout history. Right. And that while I recognize not all men have been hurt in the way that I have been hurt, I do recognize that there is a certain innate, built-in mistrust hook that many men carry towards women in positions of authority. And while that may be justified in some cases, it is necessary for you as a man to man up and look inside and recognize if you've been hurt by a woman. And if you have, to identify that you could be possibly using that as an excuse to undermine other women. And I am saying this not to argue for Kamala Harris, because I don't agree with her, and I don't believe she is being honest, and I don't believe she has the best interest of anybody at heart except for herself and her own well-being. That is my personal opinion. That being said, I also recognize that that's not all women. And there's a lot of examples of women out there that do deserve to lead and are doing fantastic jobs of it. And unfortunately, there are many women in positions of power that are giving that a bad name, and men that are using that to their advantage. And it is disgusting. And it deserves to be called out. And if that means I have to show the aspect of me that is not properly seated to do that, then that's what I'm being called to do. That's the path. I'm not perfect. And I have this aspect of me that I'm working on every day. And it is only through this kind of recognition, this kind of tough talk to yourself, to say, that ends here. I release that hook, that demon that I've carried. It can't live in me anymore now that I see it. It has no place to hide anymore. And anyone that is listening to this, know that that is true for you right now as I speak those words. Speak them yourself and you'll feel it. I can't do it for you. You have to. You have to go through that process. But I'm here to explain it to you, because that process has been hidden from us, and that is wrong. In many ways, the negative aspects of the masculine that have come out into the world, that have been identified, those are being worked on right now. And I think the reason why is because it was necessary for men to experience, to gain perspective, as I have in this. Right? In order to understand what somebody is complaining about, you have to have an experience that relates in some way to that experience. And some of the things that women have been complaining about are fundamentally about powerlessness. So that because we have been the protector, because we've had this physical strength on our side throughout human history, we have had an ability and the role of acting in that certain power status, I guess you could call it, in using that power to enable civilization is a better way of putting it. But if you don't have an experience of the opposite, there's negative aspects to that kind of control as you exude it throughout history that affect people negatively, that work against you, so that it is necessary for you to experience the same thing so you understand it. And I believe if there's a reason why men are now going through that kind of experience in the world, it is for that reason. And I'm not saying, and I'm speaking to men right now, I'm not saying that to try to give excuses or to try to give you to let women off the hook for what has been happening over the last decade. There's a responsibility that women have to figure out themselves that they have abandoned. That's not my role to say. Right? This is ours, men. The way that we take back our proper role in this world is by recognizing that we haven't done it properly yet. While there's examples throughout history, there are exceptions to the rule, not the rule, and that's a problem. So what we do as men in the modern day is we look back to those examples and we bring them forward. We embody them. Figures like Marcus Aurelius, right? All of the thinkers throughout history. We take those aspects that speak to a higher dimension in us and we embody them so that our wives and our mothers and our daughters and our sons and our fathers and everybody that our lives touch are better for it. That's our responsibility. And we haven't been doing that. So if you're sitting alone, wondering why you're so lonely and wondering why the world has abandoned you, know that there's a purpose to it. You're not wrong. The only thing that will make you wrong is if you allow that hook that has now been built inside of you to pull you in a direction that would cause you to attack the thing you're supposed to protect. To speak clearly, men, just because you've experienced unfairness does not give you the right to attack women, does not give you the right to treat them with prejudice. And I think if there's any positive that I can pull out of what Barack Obama said, it's that. You may not be right in your motivation or your end goal, but if you speak truth, I will pluck it out and I will try to apply it. And that's the truth. So women, if you're listening to this, I hope that brings some solace to you, because I want to reveal this conversation to you, because I believe that you deserve to see this process. It's part of the healing. You need to know that we felt it, right? So that you know that we understand what it feels like to be powerless. So that we do everything we can to never make you feel like that again. That's the message that wants to come through today. And I hope it's bringing you comfort. Or even if it's not comfort, I hope it gives you a direction to start walking. Something to work on. Something to believe in. A future that's really bright. So, that being said, I think that's what I got for you this morning. The weight is lifted off of me because I've now spoken it to the world, speaking it. So, if you now feel a certain weight, right, know that all you're being asked to do is share that weight in the way that I just did, right? Not in a way that makes other people heavy on purpose to burden them. in a way that reveals yourself and your experience so that other people can feel it too and know that you're being honest. Right. We're not perfect. All of us have made mistakes. And those mistakes we pay for through this kind of vulnerability. That's the way forward. I want to send you a lot of love. And I want you to know that I'm walking with you on this path. And that it is getting brighter. You know, it's funny how the world can change so quickly. From that place that I was describing earlier with barriers and shadows to a place of freedom and brilliance. And I've just experienced that transition in the time that I've talked to you. I hope you have as well. Have too, or as well. All right, guys. Lots of love.